So as I'm sure many of you probably know, last year I actually reviewed something that, big shocker, wasn't related to Bluey, and it was a little show called Chip Chilla. It's basically a cartoon about a family of chinchillas, with them playing games and having fun, I think? It's been a while, but if I remember correctly, I think there was like one episode where they almost lit the house on fire, which to me doesn't seem that fun, but you do you, I guess.
That's great, Dad.
And I could talk about the background, the negative reception, or the, odd similarities to Bluey, but that's basically what the first video I did was about. So if you want to see that, there you go. However, for those who've already seen it, and were thinking to yourself, wow, this dog dude on the internet is so wrong. This show is actually an underappreciated masterpiece. I wish there were even more episodes. And well, for the 11 people who felt that way, I have good news for you, because as of April 2024, they actually released a second season. And I mean, come on, with something like that, who needed the boring, overrated snooze fest called The Sign anyways? What has that blue healer and her dumb family ever done for us, am I right? This is where the real quality storytelling is at, and it's back for more. That's right, it's Chilla time, baby! But, okay, seriously, jokes aside, did anyone actually know that this show even got a second season? Because I heard a ton of people talk about the show when it first came out, but I haven't heard anyone talk about the second season, even though it came out months ago, which to me kinda added to the mystery of it. Would it perhaps feature even more dangerous, neglectful situations? A greater emphasis on conservative ideals? And more importantly, will the legend himself, Mr. Rabbit, return? And well, for the most part, only one of those things really happens, which is that Mr. Rabbit actually does return. So there's that, I guess. But overall, the second season itself really isn't too much different from the first season. Although I will admit that, in my personal opinion, as crazy as it sounds, I do think that, on perhaps a technical level, I do think that the second season is actually better.
What? Hey Bandit, you hearing this?
Oh yeah?
Although, to be fair, considering what the first season was about, that's not really a high bar to begin with. And regarding what the episodes are actually about this time, some of them aren't really that interesting or worth mentioning, but for the sake of completion, I'd say we just go over all of them, with some discussion on the more, I guess, intriguing ones. But starting with the Thanksgiving special, which I found out is actually a part of season 1 but released afterward, we do get to see some other family. And starting from here, we also get to see the new intro, even though it's a part of the first season, but whatever. And of course, it includes a pic of my boy, Chum Chum, voiced by, of course, James Arnold Taylor? Wait, what happened to the other guy? The conservative dude from Home Alone 2. No, not him, the other guy. Yeah, Rob Schneider. Where did he go? I mean, come on, that was like the one thing I enjoyed about watching this. Even if ironically. Like, come on, Bentkey. Surely for a sweet set of $99, we expected better.
We? Who's we? There is no we.
And okay, I didn't actually pay for it because I used the free trials and stuff, but if I did, I would not appreciate this level of disrespect and lack of traditional, honest American integrity. How do you honestly expect to defeat the evil, woke Disney Corporation with this level of disappointment? I demand justice for our Lord and Savior, Chum Chum.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Okay, but all jokes aside again, his new voice actor isn't actually that bad. And looking him up, it seems like he's, well, to put it lightly, notably less controversial than Schneider, and has actually voiced a ton of characters before, so I guess that's actually pretty cool. And oh yeah, I got so swept up about Chum Chum that I forgot to tell you about the actual special. It's basically about the old grandparents not wanting to change anything because tradition, I guess. But then the family does do something different, and at the end they're just completely okay with it. And that's the end of the special. Nothing too riveting or life-changing per se, but I will honestly give them points for telling a message about changing tradition. Because considering the people and company behind this show, I really expected them to do the opposite and just talk about how good old traditions are. So that honestly kinda surprised me. But moving on to the actual episodes of Season 2, we have the first episode, The Truth, which is an episode featuring the characters learning to do basically that. And the plot itself revolves around them making their claims through a court case, which is definitely a plot that hasn't been done by another show before. But on the other hand, it's not like they copied Family Meeting word for word or absolutely plot for plot point, so I guess it's at least somewhat original. And outside of that, I got pretty much nothing to say except for the fact that the last sentence on the IMDb page is kind of funny, with it just ending on, Chilla Court is now in session. Okay. And regarding the other plot summaries, there literally aren't any. But don't worry, because with my failing memory, we can instead rely on the Chip Chilla wiki to help us out. Okay, on second thought, maybe not. But from what I do remember, the second episode is basically about how cool Ben Franklin is, and how he has multiple talents. I mean, just imagine if the guy on the $100 bill was real. That would be crazy. Also, I forgot to write this in the script, but the lesson of the episode is basically about the sister learning that she can have multiple interests and skills because she just wants to play her instrument and do nothing else. And as far as I remember, I don't think anything like this was ever mentioned before, and it just kinda comes up randomly in this episode. But in all fairness, consistent lore is clearly not Chip Chilla's goal anyways, so it's whatever, I suppose. Moving on to the third episode, we have Robinson Chip Crusoe, which is the one where the family is planning to go to this super cool theme park. And if that sounds exciting, well, good news. We never actually get to see their visit to it. Probably because designing and animating that just wasn't in the budget, but in fairness, I guess Bluey also does something kinda similar in Mount Mom and Dad, so fair play I guess. You win this time, Chip Chilla. And in all honesty, this episode, despite the fact that we don't even actually see the park in real life, is actually one of my favorites.
Wait, what?
At least if I was forced to choose one anyways. Because it's mostly about Chip being bored and learning to find stuff to do, but it's honestly kinda chill. And unlike some of the other episodes, I didn't feel like it really dragged along or got super old really quick. And dare I say, some parts were actually kinda charming, and overall, I thought it was a passable story. So congrats, Chip Chilla! You made an actual decent episode. Yippee! But moving on to another episode, one that also kinda stands out is the Snow Cake Corral, which as the title implies, kinda has a western theme or style story to it, with Chip basically learning to stand up to this group of mean kids who took over the playground, and of course, our boy Chum Chum able to give Chip advice to help him out, and also just happening to have the perfect outfit for the occasion? Which, in case you couldn't tell, is something that actually occurs a lot in this show. Like, does this dude just have an entire party city hidden in his car? Or does he, like, secretly plan all of this in advance? Or heck, is Chum Chum God himself? Dictating the events of the Chip Chilla world perfectly to fit his lessons and stories? I mean, if he was in charge, it would kinda explain why the mean kids are the most generic and cliche bullies ever, but I digress.
Pipsqueak thinks you can use my swing set. She must be new here. Yeah.
However, their reign of terror is short-lived, because Chip challenges their evil regime over the playground, and with a short snowball fight and glorious revolution, they almost instantly give up and run away. But before they could leave, Chip decides to be nice and offers the kids to play with them. And of course, despite all the mean stuff they did and said throughout the entire episode, they instantly become friends, and everyone now just gets along perfectly fine. Woohoo. And honestly, that seems kind of anticlimactic if you ask me, but in fairness again, Bluey also did something similar with Hercules, so I guess you also win this one, Chip Chilla. But for something that Bluey hasn't done yet, we do get an episode about ninjas.
Ninja kicks! Hi-ya!
Which I've heard some people say is kinda stereotypical, and I guess to an extent it maybe could be, but as a person with actual Japanese ancestry, I personally didn't see anything obviously wrong with it, and if anything, as a Californian, I was honestly more offended by Chum Chum's overly loud surfer accent in the Extreme Sports episode. No offense to the voice actor himself, but the decision to have Chum Chum speak like this for the entire episode got old super fast.
Hick hypothesis. Now, time for stunt numero uno.
And also, speaking of the sports episode, I couldn't help but notice that they have a sign featuring a very interesting design involving a cross with 4 sets of speed lines and 2 lightning bolts, which kinda reminds me of the symbols used by a very infamous group I'll probably get demonetized for even mentioning. Although I wanna say, even with that in mind, I do think that this was an unfortunate coincidence and not intentional or subliminal messaging. Or at least, maybe even some kind of dark joke by one of the artists. But honestly, I would have no idea. However, moving on further, they actually do have an episode that kinda has an interesting message in it, with the Robin Hood episode being about Chip not having as much candy as his sister, and to the surprise of absolutely no one, he's of course jealous. And from here, I assumed that the episode would just be about everyone getting equal amounts, and that this would be some kind of allegory for communism, that the episode would proceed to show the flaws of, and promote capitalism. And to my surprise, that's actually what it does. Kind of. Basically, Chum Chum plays the role of the king, and has Chip take everyone's candy, under the guise that they'll all get their share, but of course, keeps it all for himself, leading the others to basically revolt against him, and learn that one person or entity shouldn't be in charge of deciding what's fair or right for everyone.
It's not right for one person to decide what's fair for everyone else. You're definitely not fair.
Fair?
And I do think this could be interpreted in some way as a message against government control and regulation in general, but after thinking about it some more, I feel like that's probably not what most kids or even some adults watching are probably gonna get out of this. And at face value, it is mainly just a standard message about standing up to tyranny and people who are actually using their power or control for bad, as opposed to just being against any form of control or big government. And I also feel like if they actually did want to make an episode that was just straight up about government regulations and control, I'm sure they probably would have used a different plot or story to emphasize this message. And who knows? Knowing the show's origins, maybe they will. And speaking of good old American capitalism, I was also surprised to see that they actually had an episode about Henry Ford, who is perhaps best known for creating the car company called, well, Ford, and having a lot of troubling opinions. And I mean, I'm not gonna act like I know everything about him, and I won't get into it too much, but I'll just say that if people like the Austrian painter with the mustache say they look up to you, that might be a sign you're not exactly on the right side of history. And of course, the episode obviously doesn't mention that side of Ford's history, but they do credit him with inventing the assembly line, which they used to help bake cupcakes for Mr. Rabbit. So while this is an obvious omission of some important history, at least they got that right, I suppose?
But really, my biggest accomplishment was creating the assembly line.
You bet that.
Actually, Henry Ford didn't invent the assembly line. He invented the first moving assembly line and used it to great success to change the auto industry, but he did not invent the assembly line itself, or was the first to use it for the automotive industry. That credit goes to Ransom Olds, the founder of a separate but now defunct car maker Oldsmobile. Oh, well, thank you for the contribution. You're a very smart guy, and for that, we'll never forget your name. Did anyone catch what his name was? Anyways, moving on though. There's only one more episode left to cover, as the seasons for this show are actually pretty short. Very disappointing, I know. But for the season finale, it's basically a parody of Johnny Appleseed with Chip planting potatoes. A potato chip, if you will. Ha ha. Clever pun, I know. In fact, it's so clever I actually stole it from the episode itself.
I'm not even Johnny Appleseed. I'm Potato Chip?
Even better!
And outside of depicting various tall tale figures in a kind of fun way, and surprisingly, even including an entire song at the end of the episode, that's mostly all that happens, even though it is kind of fun, I suppose. And from there, that's pretty much everything that happens in the second season. Overall, as I mentioned, it's still nowhere near as good as Bluey, although I assume all of you probably already knew that, but I do personally think that the episodes this time were actually an improvement, even if only slightly, as there were a couple episodes I did find at least interesting, and there weren't as many that just had basically nothing going on, which is probably the best way I can put it. And outside of that, I will also mention that compared to the first season, it does kind of feel like some of the messages in these episodes were a bit more noticeable, but I don't think it's anywhere near quite the obvious anti-woke right-wing propaganda some viewers might have been expecting when it first began, as the depiction of Henry Ford and the ignorance towards all of the very unfortunate things he did is arguably one of the most controversial things this show has outside of its origin. But unless the subtle messaging or symbolism flew over my naive little brain, that's all I've really found as of yet. And in general, most of the episodes seem to still mostly be just about Chip and his family, recreating various classical stories or history as usual, with Chum Chum putting on various costumes and accents, because that's just what he does, I guess. But in summary, Chip Chilla Season 2 is something that exists, and in some form, I actually think is better than the first season, but not exactly a masterpiece that's gonna win awards anytime soon. However, with all that said, for anyone who's actually seen it, or heck, even know it actually existed, I'm really curious to hear what y'all think about this one, and if y'all caught anything that I may have missed. But in the meantime, my name's Hideaki, and I'll be signing out. Have a great day everyone, and goodbye!
Oh, they got me!
So for today's art of the day, we have this fantastic piece by user Kerechi, or Charlie from Discord. I thought this drawing of Hideaki recording a video was a really fun idea, and not to mention super cute and just really well done, so thank you.